WLRN edition 121 in 3, 2, 1.
I was born woman, off my knees I will stand for my liberation. Sisters, rise again. I was born woman, off my knees I will stand for my liberation. Rise and rise again.
Greetings, and welcome to the 10th Anniversary Edition podcast of Women's Liberation Radio News for this Thursday, May 7th, 2026. That's right. 10 years ago this month, WLRN began broadcasting a monthly handcrafted, collectively co-created podcast with a spirit of feminist community building to fight the powers that be. Women's critical voices are censored in patriarchal societies across the globe. WLRN became a volunteer labor of love to resist this censorship and make a sound from below. In honor of our 10-year anniversary, we'll play Thistle's song, Real Voice, that was used as WLRN's theme music for the first 7 years of our existence. Stay tuned for that song a bit later on in the program. This is Jocelyn, happily radical and permanently against the patriarchy. I like to think of myself as a thinker who believes that critically contemplating female existence and agency under male supremacy is not only important, but imperative. When I am not writing, I like to drink coffee. Ideally, I engage in these activities concurrently. This month's edition focuses on the systemic nature of pedophilia and abuse of women as seen in the handling of the Epstein files and Epstein himself. We'll hear an excerpt of an interview Thistle did with Gail Dines, an expert in the harms of pornography and founder of Culture Reframed, an organization dedicated to the well-being of children and women. We'll also hear commentary about this topic from yours truly. The team at WLRN produces a monthly radio broadcast to break the sound barrier women are blocked by under the status quo rule of men. This blocking of women's discourse we see in all sectors of society, be they conservative, liberal, mainstream, progressive, or radical. The thread that runs through all of American politics, except for separatist feminism, is male dominance and entitlement in all spheres. To start off today's edition, here's Cat Bradfield with women's news from around the globe for this Thursday, May 7th, 2026.
On April 24th, a Court of Appeal in Kenya struck down a 2022 ruling affirming the right to safe and legal abortion. In Kenya, thousands of women die each year from unsafe abortion. However, the court decision argues that unborn children have a right to life which begins at conception. The country's constitution states that abortion is prohibited in Kenya unless medically necessary, or in other extenuating circumstances such as rape. The 2022 ruling intended to make access to abortion easier and to clarify the constitution after the wrongful arrest of a teenage girl and the doctors who treated her after a miscarriage. However, the Penal Code of Kenya was not updated to reflect this ruling, with the practice still criminalised by a law from 1963. This ongoing criminalisation discourages medical professionals from providing abortions, leading women to instead seek out unsafe and unregulated alternatives. Each year, over 21,000 women in Kenya are hospitalised from abortion complications. The New York-based Center for Reproductive Rights said in a statement that this case forms part of a broader pattern in which individuals seeking or providing reproductive health care face criminal sanction despite constitutional guarantees of dignity, health, and freedom from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. The decision is likely to be appealed to Kenya's Supreme Court. In April 2026, it was revealed that the male doctor involved in the Sandy Peggy Employment Tribunal case has relocated to Australia and is registered as a female doctor by Australian medical regulator APRA. During the tribunal in the UK, the biologically male Dr. Beth Upton gave sworn evidence of an intention to treat patients who had specifically requested a female doctor. This news has sparked debate in Australia over informed consent and capture of APRA by trans lobby group ACON. Under Australian law, informed consent requires disclosure of material information that a reasonable patient in the same position would want to know. With many female patients requesting same-sex care for cultural, religious, trauma-related, modesty, or privacy reasons, APRA's conflation of sex with self-declared gender creates a significant gap in protections for female patients. Australia's national broadcaster, the ABC, recently cut its ties with ACON over concerns about bias and impartiality, and women's rights groups are now calling on APRA to do the same. On April 24th, an Ontario judge found ex-neurologist Jeffrey Sloker not guilty on 48 counts of sexual assault. Sloker's practice licence had been revoked in 2019 after a series of complaints leading to an investigation and disciplinary process. The trial began in 2021 but was prolonged for a number of reasons. The allegations date back to 2010 and first surfaced in 2017, arguing that Sloker used medical examinations as a ruse to gain access to the bodies of female patients. The judge found in his decision that the patients testifying provided unreliable evidence. The ruling was met with immediate reaction from those in the courtroom, with many crying and shouting shame. Groups of people had gathered outside the courthouse earlier in the day to hold up signs in support of the patients, and many remained after the trial to express their disappointment in the judge's decision. In Malta, campaigners from Netherlands-based charity Women on Waves have affixed 15 lockboxes containing abortion pills to sites across the country. The aim of the boxes is to provide practical help to women living under the strictest abortion laws in the European Union. Any woman in need of an abortion and less than 9 weeks pregnant is able to send an email requesting the location and codes to access the pills. Current law in Malta, heavily influenced by Catholic ideals, only allows for abortion if the woman's life or health is in danger. This exemption was only added in 2023 after an American tourist suffered an incomplete miscarriage and had to be airlifted to Spain for a potentially life-saving abortion to be carried out legally. Last month, a woman in Malta was handed a suspended prison term for inducing her own abortion using pills, with the court relying on testimony from medical staff who treated her afterwards. The organisation Doctors for Choice Malta has called on politicians to decriminalise abortion, allowing women to more easily seek medical care if needed after taking pills. Whilst the government has shown no signs of moving on the issue just yet, campaigners remain optimistic for the future, with surveys from 2021 and 2022 indicating that most post-secondary school students polled in Malta were pro-choice. On April 29th, it was revealed by an anonymous whistleblower that women's football teams in Sydney are being forced to sign an agreement not to forfeit games against the Flying Bats, a self-described LGBTQIA+ team that has in the past fielded up to 5 male players in the Women's League. The club was originally founded in 1985 as a club for lesbians, and has been in the news over the last 2 years for dominating the competition due to the inclusion of male players. In recent seasons, teams have often forfeited games against the Flying Bats in protest against the male players and due to safety concerns. In the finals of the 2024 season, cameras were banned by security because the Flying Bats were a hot topic in football circles. For the 2026 season, the Northern Suburbs Football Association has made teams in the Super League division sign an agreement stating that they will not forfeit games against the Flying Bats. This has allegedly led to some clubs dropping to lower playing divisions. The Northern Suburbs Football Association has refused to comment on the issue. On April 20th, this year's Boston Marathon marked 60 years since Bobby Gibb became the first woman to compete in a marathon. In 1966, Gibb was denied official entry into the marathon as it was believed women were not capable of running long distances. Despite this, she hid in the bushes near the starting pen and joined the race when it began. Her participation was received positively by spectators and fellow competitors, with an officially sanctioned women's division added to the race 6 years later in 1972. The anniversary was celebrated with the placement of a bronze statue of Gibb at the starting line, titled The Girl Who Ran. The statue was created in 2021 by Gibb herself and previously stood at the Hopkinton Centre for the Arts. That concludes WLRN's World News segment for this Thursday, May 7th, 2026. I'm Cat Bradfield. Share your news stories, announcements, and tips with us by emailing info@wlrnmedia.com and letting us know what's going on.
Since 2016,
empowering women to be the media
and reclaim the narrative.
Your grassroots community radio station.
By women, for women.
WLRN.
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 I turn on the news, nuclear bombs exploding in India. I walk to my job, there are bombs on the floor. Why can't people see truth from lies? Why do people take it? I want to organize.
This month marks 10 years of WLRN, and to celebrate, we'd love you to send in your votes for our countdown of the top 100 songs by women. You can send in your favourite songs, songs that echo WLRN's values, songs you want more women to know about, or even whatever songs are just stuck in your head right now. To vote, head to WLRNmedia.com and click on the photo of Dolly Parton. Over the summer, we'll be playing back the top 100 songs for our 10th anniversary music show. So head to WLRNmedia.com now and let us know what songs you want to hear.
So speak out, speak over, speak under, speak through the noise. Speak loud so I can hear you. I want to know you. I want to hear your real voice. I want to hear your real voice. Your real voice. Your real voice. Your real voice.
That was Thistle with her song, Real Voice, which was used as the theme song for WLRN when we were just starting out. Up next, we'll hear excerpts of an interview Thistle did with Gail Dines about the Epstein empire. Gail gets into the normalization of pornography in everyday life and how that plays a role in keeping men like Epstein in power in our global, patriarchal society. Though ultimately Epstein began to pay the price for being the world's top pimp, he died before he was held fully to account. Besides that, many men associated with him and even involved in his empire to terrorize and torture primarily young girls and women have gotten away scot-free. At the end of the interview, Gail goes into the good old days of the 1980s feminist movement, when activists teamed up, including Mary Daly, to do political radical feminist skits before live audiences at Harvard University. We couldn't be more fortunate to have Gail come on the show to help us celebrate the legacy of great women. Thanks, Gail.
Dr. Gail Dines is a renowned sociologist, author, and radical feminist known for her work on the harms of pornography and its impact on culture. She is Professor Emerita of Sociology and Women's Studies at Wheelock College in Boston and founder of Culture Reframed, a nonprofit dedicated to addressing pornography as a public health crisis. She's also the author of Pornland. And before we start and bring Gail on, I also wanted to read a quote that I found on the Culture Reframed website, front and center, that Gail, it's from Gail, it's something that she said, and this is what she says. She says, "It is our job to create a safe environment where young people can flourish rather than being targeted by a predatory multi-million-dollar industry that is almost completely deregulated." So welcome, Gail.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
As we know, in the UK, former Prince Andrew has been arrested for his role and association with Epstein and the leaking of political information. But what about consequences in the US? What are some of the most significant implications of how the Epstein files and empire have been dealt with by authorities in the US?
Well, not well. I mean, first of all, it was the bravery of the survivors coming forward that has really made this an issue. And of course, you know, that's typical that women are going to be the most brave and courageous. So, I mean, really, if we were to take this to its logical conclusion, then Trump would obviously have a lot to answer for, and also a lot who covered it up. And what's interesting here is there's discussion of it, but when it comes to the actual, legal implications of what these men did, most of them got away absolutely with, a slap on the wrist. There's I don't know anyone here. Well, there's a few CEOs actually who had to resign because of this, but on the whole, there should be an absolute, groundswell of protest against these men who were mentioned in the files. And not just, I don't know if they all did actually rape children, but certainly they were in circumstances where they saw this was going on and they did absolutely nothing. And, you think about Epstein, and we talk about it, but, in a lot of ways, he was just a common garden rapist, pimp, what have you. What made this a different issue was, of course, his wealth. And that wealth brought in a lot of celebrities like Prince Andrew, who's no longer Prince, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, Mick Jagger, Woody Allen. Also, what he did was, again, because of his wealth, he managed to drag in thought leaders. And I think, we have to point to this as Noam Chomsky first, which I think for many of us on the left were pretty much devastated. And not just by Chomsky being friends with him, but by the emails that they exchanged. A lot of the professors and thought leaders that he connected with came from Harvard or MIT or Columbia University. So, these were major thought leaders. And also remember, he had massive financial connections with an ecosystem of banks, venture capitalists, hedge funds, billionaire class, politicians. So
politicians, the president of the United States. And so this is something that is inherent within our system. It doesn't seem like you said, it's just built in. There haven't been many consequences.
No. And it's also, you got to think of those in power as like, one big adolescent frat club, fraternity. Is they support each other.
Yep.
Bros come, as they say, there's a saying, bros come before hoes, which means, protect each other. If you were to think, he had all these homes. In all of these homes, he had a full staff. Hundreds of people, not to mention the connections he probably had with border control, police, because he trafficked so many women. This was a worldwide trafficking scheme. It wasn't just local women. And did they miss it? The question is, did they miss it? Did they choose to miss it?
And, or were they involved?
Possibly. We do know that some major CEOs were, and we don't know if they did rape the children, but we know that they gave him a lot of money for so-called financial services. And remember, this was a man who never finished university. And meanwhile, you've got people like Leon Black paying millions to him for financial assistance. Well, what does that mean when he's really the guy made a lot of money, but had no real background in how you do
It's things. The Bros Network.
Yeah. And also one has to ask for all these men who were involved and paid him large sums of money for so-called financial consultation. What did he have on them? Because we know there was cameras in every room or in wherever he lived. It was so of course.
So this guy is like a king. He could have been Trump. It seems like almost like the same person doing in two different fiefdoms, two different kingdoms kind of, but they're the same.
Yeah. And then in a more banal way, he's just like other pimps. What does he do? He picks in women and girls and rapes them. That's what pimps do.
It's so I would say
he was probably the world's richest pimp, and that kind of wealth power, it buys so much silence. And again, I read Virginia Giuffre's book, And I mean, it was heartbreaking to read. And if anyone wants to know, there's actually, I wrote a review of it for Ms. Magazine, so it's up there. But I mean, first of all, I mean, I've got a tough skin because I've been working with pornography for a long time. This book put me to bed, basically. I mean, I had to go and sleep because I was so upset and heart-wrenching. And she doesn't mention Pink in it.
And she committed suicide in the end, didn't she?
Yeah. How could
it's so heartbreaking.
You know, and what was so amazing about this is she was working at the Mar-a-Lago club, you know, Trump's, but how she was sort of brought into this whole pimping network was actually Maxwell was in a car with a driver and she saw Virginia Giuffre walking to Mar-a-Lago. And I don't know what nose Maxwell had for finding vulnerable young women, but she just saw her walking down the street and she stopped the car, told the driver to stop the car and got out. And that's how she originally got into the whole pimping system. So they knew the most important thing about pimps is they can smell a vulnerable girl a mile off. And she was just walking down the street. She must have just seen by the way she was walking or something, you know, and Virginia Giuffre's book just talks about the violence, the constant violence and mind fucking that went on the whole time with her. You know, when she was a kid who'd already been raped multiple times by her father's friends and at truck stops. So she was primed by other men to be taken into this whole, you know, international pimp scheme. It's one of the most difficult books I've ever read. I have to say, the violence and what happened to her. And then it turned out her husband was a wife, was domestic abuse. Yeah, and that was sort of came out after the book. But you know, these men can smell women and girls a mile off. It's amazing when you think of, you know, because I've spoken to many men who've interviewed them who've raped kids and teenagers because of their porn use. And I tell you, it's like a playbook on how to groom. Like they've all read the same book somehow.
Yeah.
But it's very similar on what
this connects to the next question that I have actually, because people say often focus on the victims of the crimes and let them speak and let's find justice for them. What do you think that means in America, and what should it mean? Melania Trump recently said this. Can we believe her? What was the function and result of her public statement?
Most people thought it was really strange. They couldn't figure out what was going on, why she spoke. You know, I read a lot about that, press she did, and no, it was very strange that nobody knows. They said was something about to drop about her relationship with Epstein. Well, at the moment, nothing seems to have come out about that. But you know, how in a patriarchal system will survivors ever get justice? It's just not set up for survivors. It's set up to protect the abusers. And so, you know, I mean, and what does it look like? Well, these guys should go to prison, the rapists. Absolutely. Those others associated with it who maybe didn't rape but were associated with Epstein should also go to prison for being part of the extensive, you know, sex trafficking ring. But, you know, the truth is a larger question what justice, because in reality, they shouldn't need justice. It shouldn't have happened to them in the first place. That's the issue. Is, you know, women are just basically the throwaway spoils of war between men.
Right. And, you know, just to reference Aurora Linnea's essay she just put up about victims and survivors and those two terms, just as a little side note, really they're victims then. They're not, you know, it's okay to say that these women are victimized by patriarchal society and by this predatory behavior that is in the system. And, you know, they're not surviving, they're dying. they're being harmed.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just wanted to give a shout out.
I think that's a great point, because you use the word survivors, but you know, I have worked with so many women and girls who have been in this situation. And you're right, they're barely surviving. They're barely hanging on with their,
Okay, cool. Well, that's Aurora Linnaeus, essay, subject of her latest essay. But I wanted to move on also to about social media and how it is, and AI, and how do we know? Because that was something Melania said during her speech, is that, things you see are fake. And how do we know what's real about the Epstein files and what's not?
We don't. The truth is, on that level, she's right. Everything is increasingly fake. People no longer believe women's stories. They assume they made them up. And also, you really can't believe images anymore because the AI it can be faked through AI. So it's very hard to prove. I recently on my Facebook page, and people join because they know I'm a radical feminist, and I think I've got about 5,000 people. I talked about this awful new film coming out that's now out about Michael Jackson. That is a whitewash on, his daughter wouldn't have anything to do with it because she said he doesn't tell the story. And I was amazed on my Facebook page, where they know what they're getting, which is radical feminism, is how many women said he was basically innocent of all charges. And I thought, you've got all this testimony, you've got all this evidence, and yet you can still say he's innocent. I mean, this is the problem today. We live in a world where facts don't matter, right?
And it's increasingly hard to know what the facts are because of all of the AI and the social media and whatever, which brings up the idea, which I think is part of our radical feminist activism, is building trust amongst ourselves as humans, speaking to one another in real time, as opposed to always trusting things that we see online. And I don't know, I just think we know this abuse is happening. We've known it. AI is not going to take that knowledge away. And if women speak the truth, we should be able to, as our animal instincts dictate, we should be able to hear that in the human voice, and not through these AI generated or social media whatevers. So and here's a question from Lola from our collective. She asks, how do you think AI-generated sexual content and digital culture are reshaping the landscape of exploitation that Epstein operated within?
Oh, it's a nightmare. I'll be honest with you. And especially for young people and girls in this culture. So we live in a pornified culture. So that's basically ingrained into boys and girls. And we know that when you learn something very young, often it follows you into adulthood. So it's not like when your frontal lobes are fully online and in your late 20s, often you switch. You don't. You develop scripts very young, sexual scripts as well. So let me just give you an example. We were recently, I won't say where, but a rural place, and we gave talks about what was going on. And the stories of the kids about AI were unbelievable. How many of their male so-called friends are making pornographic AI of them, sending it around the schools. These boys are still, they're not expelled. The girls are terrified because the AI porn is out. And some of these boys who do this and distribute it, in some cases, they put the girls' names, addresses, school, and even manage to get into their school schedule so the perpetrator knows where she is at any moment. Now, can you imagine living in that fear?
It's sexual terrorism.
Totally. Which, was a term was coined many years ago, but it is. You never know when it's going to strike. That's why we all, as women...
These poor young girls, the 15,
terrible.
16, 17-year-olds living with this. And, I think a lot of adults don't even know it's happening,
No. And you know what we often get as a response when we speak to young people, especially girls, is, my life would have been so different if I'd known what you're saying when I was younger.
Oh, I'm so glad Culture Reframed exists.
Yeah.
And here's a question. What do you think should happen to President Trump regarding his alleged role in the Epstein empire? Does the United States justice system have the integrity and power to actually hold him and all of Epstein's associates to account?
Well, I think that's an easy answer. No, absolutely not. I mean, look, he puts his own people everywhere. He himself is a sexual terrorist in the way that he goes after women. And then, all of these guys, and I'm talking from Trump to Cosby, you name them, all of them.
Pete Hegseth? I mean, we don't know, right? Pete Hegseth?
No.
Kind of Trump's right-hand man. We don't know. But anyway, you're saying all of these men, a lot of these men.
Well, they have attack dog lawyers.
Are involved.
Give you an example. Yes, Weinstein, and also Cosby, who both of them, God knows how many women and girls they raped. They would send their attack dog lawyers to the home of these young, vulnerable, often working class girls. They would send their attack dog lawyers at 3 a.m., so everyone was asleep, bang on the door, push in, get the whole family downstairs, and then go through exactly how they were going to destroy the family if this got out. And this was time and time again. Most of them have these attack dog lawyers. And, if you're a family with limited means and, what are you going to do? Because they
right. It's so hard for victims to come forward in our
It's terrifying,
States,
and
justice system,
that's why those
injustice system.
Yeah, but
so what is the core cause of pedophilia and all of this, and men abusing women, and how can this problem be solved in our society?
Well, obviously, it's patriarchy as a system, because patriarchy is infused into every single system. Legal, educational, medical, you name it. And I would say now what also we're finding is because pornography is so ubiquitous, because it is everywhere, because it is all over social media as well as the porn sites, you have had a massive cultural shift in a way that very few people understand. Pornography now is so normalized amongst young people that it's not an embarrassment anymore. It's kind of, they boast about what they've seen. Also, remember, put that up against the fact that the sex education in this country and problems in the UK is useless, right? They don't get any, and sex education is taught as if we live in the 1990s. We, at Culture Reframed, have probably written the most extensive porn critical sex education for high schools.
Do you know if any high schools use that curriculum?
Yeah, it's all over the world, and it's free. So anyone, just go to culturereframed.org. And what's different about this is we do it within a sex education, within an exploitation framework, specifically. And we go into pornography. So a lot of teachers who do sex ed, they're often not sex ed teachers. They don't know how to do it, and let alone how to deal with pornography. So we have written an extensive curriculum with PowerPoints, lesson plans. You can use all of it, you can use some of it, but we provide everything. Notes for the teachers, because the reason is in the UK, for example, some of my feminist friends there sent me examples of sex education. And what happened in 2020, it was law that you had to teach sex education. But of course, they didn't have really good curriculum. So what they did is private companies came in to write it. So, for example, in one sex education program I looked at, where there's stuff on pornography, they said, it's like chocolate. Have some of it and enjoy it, but don't eat too much of the chocolate. I mean, you cannot, or use pornography safely. What, you're telling a 14-year-old boy, porn-fused boy, to use porn safely? And then in other cases, they're saying things like, even not endorsing, but things like strangulation. They're not explaining that actually, not only can you die from it, when you're being strangled during so-called sex.
I know someone who did die from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon, but even worse, they reckon that over 40% of women who are in their 40s who have strokes had it because they were strangled during so-called sex. Right? So the and also they tested the blood of those girls and women who'd been strangled, so-called sexually, and those who hadn't. Your brain changes, it shifts forever, and it's called non-fatal strangulation, where the impact on the cognitive impact, your memory, all of the things that are crucial have a really serious on women. So, and they don't say that. They said, if you're going to do strangulation, do it safely. You can't strangle someone safely, and neither should you do it anyway, because
this is being taught to adolescents and
in high
pre-adolescents.
schools, in some of them in the UK, yeah, which is why after we got so many emails from teachers in the UK who had to teach it, said, can you write something that's got pornography at the center of it? So we brought in, what we always do at Culture Reframed is we bring in top draw consultants who have been doing this work. And we build, obviously, feminist, but we're very careful with the feminism. It comes often under the radar, but it's absolutely infused throughout, because some schools won't use it if you see the word feminist. So but it's there. I mean, very clear.
Well, yeah. If you're resisting the pornographic empire, or the, whatever you want to call it, then there's going to be some feminism involved. But we don't have to use the F word, especially when we're in the public schools, in order to at least have that analysis and get the information out there to the children. I mean, gosh, it's a health, like you say in that quote, it's a public health crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the major form of sex ed across the world. Right, studies show.
Pornography is the major form of sex ed, like teaching to do it safely, but without explaining what that even means. Using these buzzwords, oh my gosh, like choice,
and also the violence,
and do it safely, give consent. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know. It's hard for me, and I say this a lot during my interviews when I interview women who are so knowledgeable like you are. Like, it's so hard for me to not just be despairing, and but yet here you are, you've created this curriculum that's free for teachers online in your organization, Culture Reframed. Like, you must think that we can, as a species, overcome this epidemic.
We don't, you know what? And I know it's overwhelming what we're fighting, but if you give in to despair, we're doing the work of patriarchy. They want us to despair, right? This is what, and I can.
That's what Cynthia Enlow said to me when I was interviewing her about the nuclear arms race.
Yeah. Cynthia's work is fantastic. No, I mean,
so if you give in to despair, then they are winning. You're allowing them.
I mean, it means they've got no opposition. I mean, my goal, and people say, what do you have a goal? I said, well, the goal obviously is to wipe out patriarchy and everything its attendant, obviously. But if I really think what I'd like, I want the pornographers to have bad night's sleep because of Culture Reframed. I want them to lay awake at night worrying what we're going to do, right? And in fact, I've been involved in a lot of legislation for age verification law. I was actually involved in the first age verification law that got passed in Louisiana, which is now spread across the country in 20-odd states, is law. It's not a great law. It's nowhere near as good as the Online Child Safety Act that came in the UK in 2025, but at least we've got to get a foot in the door to begin to regulate this monster. I mean, the level, it's ridiculous. It's completely unregulated, except just now in the arena of age verification. And whether we win or not, you always use the courts as your theatre.
In schools, I feel like they think regulation means censorship, that you won't allow this free discussion of sexuality or whatever. Can you talk to that?
Well, first of all, you can't really, in the age of the internet, you can't talk about banning anything, it's not a term that belongs in this century, banning. The way that we go after predatory companies, the most powerful way is through money. And in the United States of America, because you can, if you do a class action suit, they lose so much money. What I would love to see is class action suits brought against the main sites like Pornhub, X Hamster, bought by the women, the boys, the girls, whoever's been harmed by pornography, right through the value chain from production through to consumption, to bring massive class action suits. I mean, I was an expert consultant for the Girls Gone Wild, and that was about 10, 15 years ago. And we just went after him, and we bankrupted him. That's why you don't see Girls Gone Wild anymore, because he had to pay millions and millions, and eventually it became just too much, you know? So I would love to see these massive class action. I mean, can you imagine the list we could make? The women in the pornography, the harms done to them, which are unbelievable, both physically and emotionally. Go after do a class action suit on behalf of kids who've been targeted by the porn industry, because kids often, they reckon 40% of kids do not go seeking porn. The porn comes at them via algorithms on social media.
So horrible.
So, there's so much we could do. But the trouble is, of course, as radical feminists, we don't have money.
Right.
That's the issue, to do what we could do. We also, unfortunately, we have to deal with the so-called empowerment feminists, right, who have taken over women's studies and taken over all these areas, who argue that actually it's empowering to do things like, porn or OnlyFans is the big thing now that we're talking about being empowering. I mean, what's empowering about being a sexualized object that is disposable? Right? Men don't have to routinely take their clothes off and do what other people tell them to do. That they've got other means, although we can't get rid of the fact that there are men who, especially men of color, who are poor and don't have much. But women are the top. Women's bodies are monetized, they're commodified, they're transactional. We've got to stop all of that, and we've got to stop it on a systems level, because the new so-called empowerment feminists, they don't think like that. They're they think on the level of the individual. So if I'm okay, and look at me, I've got race privileges, I've got economic privileges, I am so empowered. That means nothing for the women who come and clean up my classroom when I'm done, or go on OnlyFans. Individual feminism was always about liberation. When I joined this movement when I was like 19, 18, I never heard the word empowerment. The only word we ever used was liberation, which was about collective overthrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for all women, that if one woman is oppressed, then if we have got a voice and the means to do this, we walk whatever and cross mountains, whatever it takes.
Yes, and I want to point out that, yes, money is important in class action suits that are expensive, but I also think that what you and I are doing right now, and that does kind of ironically bring it back to an individual conversation, but also a larger discussion, because obviously this is a radio program and there are women who are listening in, but that consciousness raising is so important, and that is free.
Totally.
And that's what those executives are gonna lose sleep at night, because Culture Reframed and WLRN and all these women who are activists are talking to one another and building up that social fabric that I see how powerful face-to-face interaction in the moment with one another is, how important that is. Creatures and animals with instincts, as opposed to the screen. And I think we need to have faith in that part of us being these furry mammals that we want to deprogram underneath it all, and we don't want to be attached to the screens. And I see it amongst middle school students that they really want to be close to each other in these friendship groups, and that brings me hope, because it's free. Getting in touch with our biology and us as getting outside, being in nature. I feel like that has a lot of potential besides just class action suits and money, and that kind of to me sounds like still buying into the system. It's like we need to liberate ourselves from the male system of money.
Everything.
And,
Male everything, yeah. I mean, no, absolutely. But, when you think back to the 80s of radical feminism, it was glorious. We had comedy shows. I remember doing one with Mary Daly. We did something like Patriarchs on Trial, and we filled the largest hall at Harvard, and we each system, so we had you had to give testimony against them. So I did testimony against the porn industry. Somebody else did testimony against the polluters and the climate crisis. Somebody else gave testimony, I think, against surrogates. But we had all these issues. And then what we'd done is, I hadn't done, but other women had done, had made paper mache they looked and put the faces on of Larry Flint and people like that. This was in the 80s. And then Mary Daly was the judge. And each one of us would come forward and we'd give our presentation against them. And then she'd shout out, Mary Daly, so she'd shout out things like disorder in the court, which is what she wanted. And then at the end, the actual audience had to vote guilty or not guilty. And of course, it was all radical feminists and everyone was screaming guilty. And the head was a balloon. And so somebody had an axe. And every time they were guilty, popped the balloon and took the head. And I tell you, women were like falling out the aisles. It was so, those things really gave us strength. They gave us, sisterhood.
I know, I remember that it still carried over a little bit into the 1990s. And I went to Mishfest in 2000, where I had that feeling when I was watching a Tribe 8 punk rock performance and the theater. And in this one, it was a little bit more in your face. It was, she has a dildo and she cuts it and then she throws it into the audience. And, that was very edgy. But it was that same response in the audience that like just laughter and, wow, we can collectively have a good time together and also, really defeat patriarchy. And I don't know if we'll ever get that back, but I have to, like you said, instead of wallowing in despair, which does nothing, I have to enjoy being with women and brewing up our own witchery, our own craft together to, have a taste at least of what it might be like to co-create a system like at Mishfest of anti-patriarchy, or in other words, a women's village, a women's society where women are free.
It's glorious. You can't have more fun than being around a bunch of radical feminists. What's better than that, really, when, because you're with your people.
You're with your people, exactly.
These are loud people, it just, and we used
to. And if it wasn't powerful, they never would have shut down Mishfest.
No.
So,
which is a total loss. But there's other groups who are doing radical feminist.
Oh, totally. There's still women gathering on the land.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. I'm glad you see it happening now too, Gail, because it's hard. It's a dark time. And, I feel so inspired to have interviewed you for our 10-year anniversary edition. It's very special. Thank you so much for spending time with me and with all of our
anytime. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
You are listening to WLRN.
Hey WLRN listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to our 10th anniversary edition. This is Anne, WLRN sound engineer, chiming in. I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the institution that WLRN has become. We've never missed a month in all that time of broadcasting. Up next, you'll hear from a few other members of the collective on what it means to them to reach this milestone. Wishing WLRN another 10 years of women working together and learning together about what ails us and what frees us.
Wow, what a powerhouse of a show with Jocelyn Crawley's commentary, my interview with Gail Dines, and all of you out there listening and helping to keep us afloat for 10 years. So thank you, WLRN listeners and supporters. This is Thistle. I'm so happy to be celebrating 10 years of WLRN.
Hi, this is Jocelyn, and I am so happy to be part of the WLRN Collective and to be celebrating 10 years in your ears. Thank you for staying tuned and for supporting radical feminist independent media.
Hey WLRN listeners, this is Frida. Thanks so much for joining us and tuning in for our 10th anniversary podcast. It's really a pleasure for me contributing to WLRN as we highlight both our feminist achievements and all that we still have ahead of us. If you'd like to be part of the collaboration here at WLRN, please visit our website, WLRNmedia.com, and click on the volunteer tab. And if not, please keep listening and spread the word.
Happy 10th anniversary to Women's Liberation Radio News. This is Margaret. I've enjoyed participating since 2022 after meeting Thistle at the Sisters for Sisters Conference. I appreciate Thistle for starting WLRN and keeping it going, along with all of the women who have contributed in all of the ways, producing and participating in interviews. Cheers to women's community and solidarity.
Happy 10th anniversary to WLRN. This is Sekhmet Shiaul, and I would just like to thank all of the women who have supported us over the years, listening, sharing, donating, commenting, and just contributing their presence to our media collective. So here's to another 10 years. And to all of the radical feminists, lesbian feminists, feminist adjacent women struggling against different women's issues in the world, keep fighting the good fight. Thanks again.
In discussing the Epstein files with an astute radical feminist, Esme Strakeholt, I noted her observation regarding how unnerving it is to learn that every single area of knowledge and power is touched by this man and his filth. The word filth means offensive or disgusting dirt. It also references moral impurity, corruption, or obscenity. What we have seen over the last several years with respect to the Epstein case are visual, concrete depictions of the abstract logic represented with this word, filth. Moral impurity, corruption, and obscenity. What we see with the Epstein files, which are essentially documentations of the ongoing unapologetic sexual abuse of innumerable women and girls trapped in an international trafficking ring, constitutes filth because it involves the moral impurity which is placing limitations on sentient beings by denying them bodily autonomy and sexual agency. What we see in the Epstein files amounts to corruption because it involves the ongoing use of political power, economic agency, and social networking to bring vulnerable people down rather than lift them up. What we see in the Epstein files is obscenity because the documents convey his willingness to exploitatively reduce thinking, feeling beings to objects of exchange who can be used and destroyed. This is what moral impurity is. This is how corruption operates. This is the way obscenity, a form of filth, feels. It feels filthy because it is filthy. And unfortunately, the feeling of filth impacts everyone, including those who are adamantly against all of the regimes that Epstein and like-minded individuals represent. Why? Because we are living beings in a sentient world whose porosity renders us vulnerable to both the dominant zeitgeist and the minutiae of our daily interactions with other people. Therefore, everything that we are exposed to has the ability to impact, alter, and invert our psychological disposition towards self and other. As women, seeing our fellow female people being reduced to disposable objects whose bodies can be represented in film for the perverse pleasure of men is difficult. It is not just intellectually jarring, it is viscerally, somatically disorienting. I feel the filthiness of this filth in my bones, and it is impacting the way I experience myself in my female body. To acknowledge that the gender-based injustice and inequality reflected in the Epstein files is viscerally, somatically disorienting does not mean that we can or should abandon the radical feminist theoretical frameworks in which we organize this information in order to understand how power works against us and what we can do about it. We now know that the filth of Epstein relates not only to his ongoing sexual abuse of women and girls, but his recording of many of these acts of abuse in pornographic form. In her important essay, Pornography Happens to Women, Andrea Dworkin describes pornography as a process of dehumanization, a concrete means of changing someone into something. Through the relentless work of academics and activists who refuse to abandon the belief that women are people, we come to understand how patriarchal processes continue to try to reduce individuals to things, subjects to objects. Dehumanization, Dworkin tells us, happens when someone is reduced to something. When I contemplate this process, I think of the complexity involved in being a person, the idiosyncrasies, the potential for iconoclastic inclinations, the individual quirks which distinguish one entity from another. And then I think of this evidence of individuality starting to die. As aspects of individuality begin to dissipate and disquietingly dissolve into death, robotic, mechanical, scripted modes of being, such as those that we witness in pornography, surface. These representations, or rather misrepresentations of humanity, are horrifying because they reveal the power that patriarchy has to reduce potentially autonomous, independent entities to a state of slavish, mindless obedience to a male supremacist order whose final goal is the cognitive and somatic reduction of women. In many cases, the ones in which female persons are held in contempt and hated rather than just thought of as sexualized objects, the ultimate objective is elimination rather than reduction. In any and all cases, and with all cases reflecting the maliciousness and malevolence of an ideological system predicated on a lack of reverence for life, humans that continue to exist in a world where female lives do not matter are forced to grapple with the filth created by people with power who believe their perverse pleasures matter most and therefore must come first. Perverted America first. Women and girls last. These are the mantras and missions that men make. It is a language of oppression, and it ensures a non-life of objectification for women and girls. In her important essay, Objectification, feminist philosopher Martha Nussbaum argues that there exist at least 7 variations of objectification: instrumentality, denial of autonomy, inertness, fungibility, violability, ownership, and denial of subjectivity. Every element of objectification articulated by Nussbaum is present in the Epstein files, but I will confine my discourse to 2 elements here. First, instrumentality. Defined as a process in which the objectifier treats the object as a tool of his or her own purposes, instrumentality is evident in the Epstein files. It displays its ugly head as the individual lives and purposes of women and girls are abraded such that the purposes of a pervert gain primacy and then become paramount. Rather than existing as people with their own desires and wills, the victim survivors of Epstein are reduced to tools that he uses as a display of power to both himself and others. Just as Nussbaum's principle of instrumentality is operative through the form of objectification Epstein reduces victim survivors to, the principle of the denial of subjectivity is equally operative. In her essay, Nussbaum defines the denial of subjectivity as a process in which the objectifier treats the object as something whose experiences and feelings, if any, need not be taken into account. With the Epstein files, we can observe this eradication of individuality as the personalities, proclivities, and predilections of his victims, such as their desire to pursue careers in art or massage therapy, are thwarted by his desire to have them exist as expendable sex objects who must be readily available for exploitation. While understanding the theoretical underpinnings and implications of the Epstein files is important, it is likely even more crucial that we as women listen to the voices of victim survivors. In her own discourse regarding the abuse she was subjected to at the hands of Britain's Prince Andrew, Virginia Giuffre stated, "He knows what happened. I know what happened. And only one of us is telling the truth." In making this statement, Giuffre articulates a frustration that anti-rape activists and radical feminist thinkers have been explicating and examining for quite some time. This frustration pertains to victim survivors knowing that they have been subjected to deleterious harms, yet finding it difficult to be believed in light of divergent claims being made by the perpetrator. This lack of belief in victims, which tends to exist concurrently with the blame the victim mentality, works to ensure that the rape and assault of women and girls can continue with little to no remonstrance. Just as Virginia Giuffre's personal remarks regarding the abuse she experienced in being trafficked by Epstein remind us of the many ways that women who have been sexually assaulted can be victimized by people of power, Joanna Harrison's chilling observations regarding her victimization within the sex trafficking ring enable us to remember how, within hegemonic systems of power, the individuals with more of it are able to destroy the lives of those who lack it. Originally, Harrison did not want to speak about the abuse she experienced. During the release of the Epstein files, however, Harrison's name was unintentionally made public. In light of this reality, she decided it was time to go ahead and speak out regarding her victimization. In so doing, she noted that it gets to a point where you're being suffocated and you need to breathe, and I feel this is my way of trying to breathe. In using this language, Harrison conveys the depth of precarity that individuals experience in being sexually violated and subsequently attempting to grapple with the abuse. Harrison noted that she experienced substantive shame and embarrassment regarding the abuse, and these uncomfortable, disquieting states of being enable us to understand that being invaded and abused significantly alter one's cognitive and emotive worlds. In this case, the abuse engenders a state of dissonance which is comparable to feeling as if one cannot breathe and is struggling to attain and maintain her life. In elaborating on the long-term impact that the abuse engendered in her life, Harrison notes that, "I don't smile the same way anymore." Here, we see that sexual assault can permanently impact the victim survivor's disposition such that facial expressions are not the same and perhaps point towards the permanence of an aura of negativity. Hopefully, this detail from Harrison's life will preclude individuals from committing the crime of minimization, in which the magnitude of sexual assault is overlooked and rape is reduced to a minor event, which has minimal, if any, impact on the victim survivor's well-being, life outcomes, and self-concepts. Like Harrison, Lisa Phillips's discourse regarding her victimization within the Epstein ring convey the significance of the crimes that he and others committed in subjecting hundreds of women and girls to sexual abuse. During an interview regarding Epstein's victimization of herself and others, Phillips was asked whether she believes that the release of the files would harm women as new discussions and further realizations regarding the abuse surfaced. Phillips responded, "No, we're already being harmed because there's no accountability. There's no transparency. That's what harms us, is that the people that need to be held accountable aren't." In reading Phillips' statement, I am reminded of how systems of domination work to enable predators to keep subjecting others to forms of violence which have long-standing deleterious impacts on their personhood and well-being. These systems work by precluding perpetrators from being held accountable for their actions, and this lack of accountability subjects victim survivors to another form of harm, which is harmful because it shows them that their traffickers will not experience consequences after subjecting them to sexual abuse. Nevertheless, brave women such as Phillips have moved forward with resistance towards collusion with the patriarchal systems which have tried to silence them into extinction. This resistance warrants discourse, as it would be easy to adopt the attitude which most individuals in the world tend to do in the face of systemic oppression. The prototypical attitudes include silence, collusion, avid participation, ambivalence, and anything except unequivocally responding to regimes of power with an authoritative, disgusted no. In her discourse regarding resistance as a mode of response to oppression, Catherine A. McKinnon notes that Marxism teaches that exploitation and degradation somehow produce resistance and revolution. It's been hard to say why. What I've learned from women's experience with sexuality is that exploitation and degradation produce grateful complicity in exchange for survival. They produce self-loathing to the point of extinction of self, and it is respect for self that makes resistance conceivable. Exactly. And thanks to McKinnon's grounding in radical feminist theory, we can begin to think of self-respect beyond the prototypical neo-capitalist principles of individualism and personal agency, reconceptualizing it as a revolutionary principle which enables individuals to collectively speak to and against power. As radical feminists continue juxtaposing the processes of colluding with oppressors and actively resisting them, we should also think about why the former practice is typically more prevalent than the latter. When looking at both the personal and political implications of male supremacy, most women continue to embrace various shades of patriarchy and reject feminism as undesirable or untenable. In her own ruminations regarding why, Andrea Dworkin shares with us that many women, I think, resist feminism because it is an agony to be fully conscious of the brutal misogyny which permeates culture, society, and all personal relationships. Now that it is difficult to feign ignorance of this brutal misogyny due to the seeming ubiquity of discourse regarding the Epstein files, I hope that female people all over the world will stop resisting feminism and start collectively organizing at the local and global levels to end the ongoing silence, suppression, and sexualization of women and girls.
Thanks for listening to WLRN's 121st edition podcast on the Epstein Empire with Gail Dines. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Gail. If you'd like to get some 10-year anniversary merch and support WLRN in the process, please go to WLRNmedia.com and click on the merch tab. We have a great new t-shirt design with the slogan, Female Only Frequencies since 2016, created by our fabulous graphic designer Margaret, as well as a mug option for all of you tea and coffee drinkers out there. Please do check out our 10-year anniversary merch. Until next time, this is Frida signing off on WLRN's 10th anniversary podcast for this Thursday, May 7th, 2026.
If you like what you're hearing and would like to donate to the cause of feminist community radio, please visit our WordPress site and click on the donate button. Check out our merch tab to get a nice gift in exchange for your donation. And if you're interested in joining our team, send us a letter of interest to info@WLRNmedia.com. We are looking for new volunteers to conduct interviews, write blog posts, post to our Facebook and other social media pages, and do other tasks to keep us moving forward as a collective of media activist women. Thanks for listening. This is Lola, signing off for now.
And this is Margaret. For the design of WLRN's episode 121, I started out exploring statues of the Medusa, the mythological figure who can be interpreted as a powerful symbol of female rage, trauma, and resistance against patriarchal violence. I also found images of Virginia Giuffre, one of the first of Epstein's victims to go public. I settled on one where she was holding a photo of her younger self. I replaced her hair with that of the Medusa by Bernini. For the background, I found a satellite view of Epstein's torture island, which I overlaid with an image of synapses, rather snake-like, which suggested the subconscious effects of trauma. I also used a screenshot from the Epstein files that had all of the text redacted, so it is just stripes. I played with files, focusing on Virginia until her eyes became the most prominent part of the visual. She and most of everything else ends up being obscured or obstructed, which seemed appropriate. We can see all sorts of things in the files, but our justice system is not interested in pursuing justice. Thanks for listening to WLRN's 10th Anniversary Version podcast. You can find us on X, Facebook, Instagram, and SoundCloud, in addition to our WordPress site.
And I'm Anne. Thanks for tuning in. Our handcrafted podcasts always come out on the first Thursday of the month. Look for the next one on Thursday, June 4th. If you'd like to receive our newsletter that notifies you when each podcast, music show, and interview is released, sign up for it on the WLRN website. Stay strong in the struggle, and thanks for listening.
But how will we find our way out of this? What is the antidote for the patriarchal kiss? How will we find what needs to be shown?